You have created your perfect productivity system. There's a place for goal setting, task management, note-taking, habit tracking, but you get 1 week into it and it absolutely fails. This is because you don't have a good weekly system. Productivity systems, just like everything else, need management. So a weekly system is an appointment you make with yourself that helps you clean, manage, and actually use the beautiful productivity plan that you've made. In this video, I'm gonna walk you through the basic formula to building your own weekly system and give you lots of options for customizing along the way. Okay, so there are 3 basic steps to a good weekly review, right? The first one is resolve and review. Step 2 is what I'm calling check in. And step 3, to round it all out, is the planning step, the actual planning step where you actually can get it all done. But let's start with resolve and review, shall we? So this stage is dealing with everything in the past. We are looking back at what we've done and closing it out. So things that are involved in resolving. You should be checking off completed tasks, filling in any missed habit trackers, and forwarding anything uncompleted to its new due date. That could be next week, that could be 2 weeks from now, it doesn't really matter. You just want to get all of the tasks or anything you missed out of your last week, your previous week, and move them to where they should be now. I also use this time to process notes. So for example, this is a big, huge page of notes that I made on a story that I'm writing, and I wrote this last week. And so to resolve this, I would move these notes into where I want their permanent home to be, which is actually in like my Apple Notes app, because I really like having my notes searchable, but I like writing them out on paper. So the stuff that I need to be searchable, that I need to be in its permanent home, is getting moved out of this journal where I have written it down, and then I can mark it as resolved. Often the way I do that with a standard sort of like note page is I'll give the page number in the bottom left-hand corner this little nifty like check down there, just to say like, hey, this was resolved, it's done. This page actually hasn't been resolved yet from last week, so I am going to do that later, but this is just an example of something that I will be resolving by moving it into its more permanent home, just the same way that you would resolve tasks. For example, this is a page of tasks that I had made a couple of weeks ago, and how I would forward a task is I would mark it with this little arrow that you see right here. And that would indicate that this task has been forwarded, it has been moved to its either more permanent home or to a future date when I will actually get it done. So that's resolving, but what about the review part of this? Now, reviewing is different to resolving. Resolving is just making things actionable, making things complete, making sure things are just basically good to go for the following week, clearing out all those tasks and all that junk. But reviewing is something different. Reviewing is doing things like journaling about your experience in the past week to figure out how you feel about it. You could also do a what worked or what didn't work exercise to get a sense of where you were successful and where you weren't. Here is an example of what my quarterly reviews looked like last year. So I didn't do any of this every single week. I would usually do like a what worked, what didn't work exercise, but this is pretty similar. I would journal about my accomplishments, basically what I felt like I really did well that lifted me up. I would talk about my reoccurring joy, my reoccurring pain points, and then I would create a list of action points for myself, which gets a little bit into the next step. But the point is, what I was doing here was a really emotional, really reflective experience. What lifted me up? What made me happy? What were my pain points? What could I do differently? This is all an emotional evaluation. It is not the simple brass tacks of resolving completed tasks and moving them to next week. So I think both of these are important to do in this one past-oriented step. But if you have limited time, I would say resolving is more important. So I usually do resolving first, and then if I have time, I will do this more deep journaling work. But I find that at least doing this kind of stuff once a quarter is really helpful for me. But definitely, for sure, resolving once a week is absolutely crucial to keeping myself on track. Okay, now we're going to talk about the check-in phase, and this is all about the present. The check-in stage is where you are checking in with yourself to evaluate where you are right now. In the check-in stage, we want to be looking at our overarching plan, our overarching vision, and make sure we are still oriented toward that wider vision. So this might look like checking in with your goals to make sure you're on track. Maybe you have a vision board that you want to look at in order to remind yourself what you are working towards. You could also review any words of the year, etc.
etc. But the point is to really evaluate how far you've come and how far you still need to go. And this check-in stage is really getting clear with yourself about where you are at the present moment with things like your larger vision for the year, any words of the year that you may have chosen for yourself, or any goals that you have. At minimum, in the check-in stage, I really recommend checking in with your goals, because the more you look at your goals, the more you are likely to remember them, plan for them, work with them, successfully complete them. If you never check in with your goals, if you never look back at them, you're simply not going to get them done. So I recommend at minimum checking in with your goals. For me, right now, I'm doing that in the Full Focus Planner. This is a quarterly planner that is focused around goal setting, and it's very helpful. I find it very, very helpful. So I'm doing this by checking in with this goal. Every time I do my weekly review, I look at this goal and I say, okay, what have I completed this time? Can I mark any progress on my goal progress board? Should I be updating my habit tracker? Basically just recommitting to myself in my mind, I am committing to this goal. And then I can use that information and use that check-in to propel me forward into planning. Since I added an at minimum for this check-in page here, I'm also going to do it down here. And moving on to the planning stage, this is about dealing with the future. Now, when you're doing a weekly plan, which this is for, the future is just the coming week, but we can't realistically plan our coming week until we have resolved what has been done or not done in the past week and checked in on where we are at the present so that we know what we still need to do in the future. So planning is going to look a little bit different for everyone. There are elaborate ways you could plan, like time blocking, or there are really minimum ways you could plan, such as just writing out a to-do list. Maybe even checking your calendar. These things alone are more minimal, whereas something like time blocking or project planning for the coming week might be more elaborate. I personally find that more elaborate methods of planning leave me feeling more secure, but more minimal methods of planning are better if I am in a time crunch. So at minimum, you want to check your calendar and throw out a to-do list for yourself for next week. I'm gonna go ahead and give you a couple of examples of what this looks like. So let's start with the example of time blocking.
So the first thing we're gonna look at is making a complete plan of your week through time blocking. And I'm gonna be using Akiflow to demonstrate that. Akiflow is also kindly sponsoring this video, so thank you very much to Akiflow. Let's get into it. Okay, so Akiflow is an app that enables you to have your to-do list on the left and your calendar on the right. Basically, what you wanna be doing is dragging and dropping these tasks over to your calendar to time block them onto your calendar, AKA add them in as if they were events. Now I have a whole series on my channel about time blocking, and I'll leave that linked up in the cards, but for the purposes of this video, we're just gonna go through really quickly and add all of my tasks into the blank spots in my week between my meetings, and then call that a good weekly plan. But before we do that, the first thing I wanna do is actually plan in my breaks. So I have a lot going on this week, and I know for a fact that I will need to be taking a lunch every single day, and I will need to be having 15-minute-ish breaks after my big chunks of meetings. Akiflow is built so that you can integrate all of the different email and calendar and to-do list and task management apps that you already use into one convenient place. So as you can see here, I have a number of different calendars. I have this green one, which is work. I have this red one, which is YouTube, and this purple one, which is a couple calendar. So I have a lot of different stuff I can do, but I'm actually just gonna add my lunch hour in the personal appointments calendar, which is just connected to my personal Gmail, which is blue in my color scheme. So I'm just gonna add lunch, and then I'm gonna duplicate that across the rest of the days. Okay, I've added all of my lunches in and these little 15-minute breaks after the real heavy chunks of meetings that I have. And now I'm gonna put all of my tasks on my calendar and time block them in so that I can see exactly what I'm working on at any given hour of the day. So I already put add faculty profiles to website up here first thing Monday, but it's actually not the first priority, so I'm gonna move it to later in the week. First priority is going to be getting our events newsletter up and running. So that is going to take probably, honestly, this whole chunk of time between emails and getting content. So I'm gonna book that in for an hour and 30 minutes. I also need to do some small admin tasks, like I need to pay for the career fair booth. I'm doing a career fair on Friday, and I need to pay for the booth so that I can can actually show up. So I'm gonna put that in at 1 p.m. Maybe it'll take me 30 minutes, probably more like 15. So I'm gonna book it in for 15, and then I just have a spare open 15 minutes if it takes longer. I have a few things on my to-do list that need to be done after work. So I'm putting those below the 5 p.m. line, such as scripting a YouTube video for my personal channel, doing my laundry, and then packing for beach camping, which I'm gonna go camping at the beach this weekend. So I will definitely need to do laundry and pack for that before I go. Back in my work day though, it's honestly looking pretty good. I have a good chunk of blank time because I have so many events and meetings this week. So in the interest of fully time blocking out my calendar, I could add things like catch up on work tasks here, make that a task, or something like that in the empty spaces between all my meetings and things. But for the purposes of this, I'm just gonna go ahead and leave it clear. And then this task, which is writing chapter 11 of a book that I'm working on, is actually probably not gonna get done this week, given I have so much going on. So I'm gonna go ahead and just move that all the way to next week, and then I will deal with it then. Now that my week is fully back to front, planned out, I'm feeling pretty good about it. If this that I just did seems too complicated for you though, Akiflow actually does also offer one-on-one user onboarding, which means they help you integrate everything into their program so that you can get started doing stuff like this right away, which is great. If you want to check out Akiflow for yourself, check out the link in my description box below.
So a much more basic way to do this would be to take a page in a regular planner like the Hobonichi Weeks, or you could honestly even do this on a totally blank piece of paper if you wanted to. But let's say you have a paper planner and you just need to write a few notes down. The more basic way of weekly planning that I would do is writing all my events in one column and all my tasks in another column. And these don't have to be time-stamped necessarily, but for example, I would just write a list of my meetings here. And then on this side of the page, I would write my to-do list for the week. And maybe even though this method isn't as complete, like hour by hour scheduled as the time blocking method, it is still a very good guide to look forward at the next week and say, okay, this is what's coming up on my calendar, this is what I need to get done. So I'm gonna leave this up on the screen for one more second so that you can take a screenshot if you want to. But basically this is what I consider to be a really complete weekly review or weekly system so that your productivity and your plans can all actually happen. Because without doing these things, you have no way to resolve what you've already completed, make sure you're on track for your goals, and set out some guidelines for the future. I think a lot of us just skip right towards the planning stage when we have a sort of like weekly check-in, because the planning stage feels the most manageable. Of course, next week is going to happen. Of course, I already have stuff to do. But that's why I've written down here the at minimum sections, because it will help you create like a very small, manageable weekly routine when you are crunched for time, or when you have low spoons or low energy, or the mental health is just not mental healthing. So at minimum, make sure you are resolving what you've already done, checking in with your goals, and then creating a to-do list and checking your calendar. Those are the three basic things you need to do of a week in order to be on track at a minimum. Of course, if you have a lot of time, feel free to customize this to your heart's content. Journal whenever you want to, review your vision boards, do an exercise that lets you know how close you are to achieving your dream life, whatever. Full on time block through the month. I don't care. It's up to you. As long as you're just doing some at minimum things to check in with yourself, you're going to be happy and you're going to be fine.
Maybe the most important thing for a strong weekly system is to pick a consistent time that you do these tasks every single week. For me, I always like to do mine on Sunday afternoon, but if I'm being realistic, sometimes it bleeds into Monday morning, and that's totally okay. Whatever works for you. Let me know when you like to do your weekly system in the comments down below. If you want to keep hanging out with me, I will leave a link to my time blocking video right here on the screen next to my head. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, for being subscribed, for being awesome. I love you so much, and I will see you in the next one.